Hey, what's going on, good people? What's happening? What's happening? And what's happening? Welcome to TrailBlazerz Radio. Welcome to TrailBlazerz Radio. I am your host, Mr. Frederick Beaty, and thank you so very much for tuning in tonight. You guys could have been anywhere else, but you guys are right here and you're rocking out with me, and most definitely appreciate that. Um, I want to apologize for the late start. I had an interesting day. And when I say interesting day, it was an interesting day because, well, there was a lot of things going on. So first and foremost, I want to say that I went to my post op appointment for the VA. That went very, very good. Clean bill of health, nothing bad, nothing going on, and things of that nature. So we're good. So we're good in that instance right there. So and then there was a lot of other things that were happening and going on. I'm just not gonna really get into the specifics of that right now. However, again, like I said before, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. You guys could have been anywhere else, but you guys are right here. You're rocking out with me, and I'm appreciative of that. So, what I won't say without any further delay or without any further ado, I want to just say thank you guys for tuning in thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Um, Again, you guys could have been anywhere else, but you guys are right here, and I appreciate that. Tonight's episode of Survivor Stories is going to be about me. If you tuned into the last episode of Survival Stories, we had Dr. C, Dr. Crystal Fenderson in the building talking about her survivor story, talking about her story. And it was a powerful testimony, a powerful story of, not only survival but also resilience, but also healing and learning. So tonight's story is about little old me. Um, first and foremost, I want to let you guys know that we are on YouTube. We're on Facebook at TrailBlazerz Radio. We also have an Instagram page. We also have a TikTok, TrailBlazerz Radio. So make sure you follow us on all those social media platforms. But like I said, tonight's story is about me. I mentioned my experience and my story with domestic violence briefly before in a previous podcast, and I know I mentioned it before in a previous podcast, but I didn't really get into depth with it. Um, I mentioned some things about it, some parts of the experience that were takeaways from me and in that nature. But I want to go a little bit deeper into that. Just want to go a little bit deeper into that. So for those that don't know, for those that don't know, I'm a gentleman who um, was on both sides of the Gulf. I've been on both sides of the Gulf of this. The abused. I've been the abuser, should I say, and also been the abused. My story is probably one of many stories from men who have not really said it, who have experienced this in their life and haven't really said anything about it. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my story. And to begin, honestly, we need to begin and to talk about my story. We need to begin in the year of 1997. 1997. Hmm. And the first story that I'm going to tell you guys about is the story from the me being the abuser. We'll get to the abuse part in a moment, but I want to talk to you guys about the abuser part. That's that is a shorter of the two. That is a shorter of the two stories. And as I said before, to really talk about this in the begin, we need to begin in the year of 1997. 1997 was a year was a pretty decent year. Was a pretty decent year for me at the time. Had a job, was making my move up into that job, and went to a gathering in Santa Barbara, California. Met this young lady. I'm not going to say what her name is. That is to protect her. Met this young lady. We talked. Um, Hit it off. Everything was cool and wonderful. Um, I was still in San Diego at the time, so and I wanted to try to build something try to build something with this young lady. So for all intents and purposes, I moved. I went to Santa Barbara. Moved to Santa Barbara. Everything was wonderful. Everything was good. Everything was great. Everything was lovely. Seemed like everything we talked everything every time we talked we had a good time. We had a good time. Every time we talked, it was a cool conversation. Um, the physical interactions were great. Um, no issues here. No issues there. I immediately found a job, and I didn't move. I didn't. Well, she lived in Lompoc, California, which is an hour away from Santa Barbara. So I found a job at a local music store in Santa Barbara, and not Santa Barbara, Lompoc, and everything was cool. Had income. You know, Even though Lompoc was a small town, there was plenty of stuff to do. So everything was going on. Everything was going wonderful. Everything was going cool. Everything was going great. So with that, and so after a while, things began to, I won't say deteriorate, but things began to shift a little bit. The arguing was more frequent. Um, the arguing was more frequent. The Well, it was the arguing that was more frequent. There were always accusations of me stepping out on her with somebody, which is something I did not do anyway. Um, every time we would get into these arguments, I would I would take my leave. I would walk out the door and go walk out the door, take a walk, cool off, come back, and we would have a better discussion. After a while, the arguments became more frequent. The arguments became more frequent, and then I found myself going outside, going out the door more, going out the door, take a breather, take a walk, to allow my anger to dissipate, to come back in a better mood, in a better frame of mind. Until one day, I don't remember the day, I don't remember the month. However, I do remember the year. Again, 1997. And I think it was either, if I'm, and I might be getting the year wrong. It could have been 1996, and I believe, and I think that might be 1996, but 96, 97. The year does at this point doesn't matter. However, what happened after the last argument, the last argument we had does. And this was the one time. This is the one time that I wish I would have just walked out the door and calmed my nerves and got my anger in check. What I'm about to describe to y'all is very graphic. I won't even say very graphic, but what I'm about to describe to y'all is something that even to this day, when I think about it, still horrifies me. So what happened? There was this argument again about literally in regards to the same thing, whether or not I'm seeing somebody or not, or anything like that. This is something I vehemently denied and not said anything about. Vehemently denied. But it was at this point, this time, that was something I couldn't do any longer. So, what happened? So, Fred, you might be asking yourself, well, Fred, what happened? What happened was I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I grabbed this young lady by the neck, slammed her up against the wall, said some rather disparaging things to her. Threatened her with a weapon, a sharp weapon. Kept saying disparaging things to her. She tried to take the weapon, and she got a nice little gash across her hand, about right there, starting from right there, coming all the way to right there. At this point, I am literally hysterical. She's bleeding profusely. She's bleeding profusely. She called 911. Police officers came first. They saw the blood. They saw her. They saw the handprint around her neck. Immediately knew what was up. Me being afraid, but also not wanting to run, or even do anything rash. I just put my hands out in front of me. Out of the one of the officers noticed that, and knowing that I did that, they knew I wasn't offering any resistance. They arrested me right there on the spot. Then they'd really know what was coming at that point. Until I got to the police station, I knew I had done something egregious, something that went against the very essence of, I won't even say the very essence of it, but went against the very ways that I was taught as a man. You don't put your hands on a woman. You always walk away. You always talk about it. You always walk away. You're not the aggressor. And you're not supposed to be the aggressor. So in that instance, what happened was I spoke to a detective. He asked me to tell him what happened. I'm scared and I'm crying at the same time. I'm telling him what happened in between sobs and stuff like that. And he just asked the question like, he asked one question or he asked him, he asked questions, but he didn't drill me upside the head with those questions. The other thing that I noticed that is that, when, and this surprised me. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, I understand. I understand, brother. These things happen. What you did was wrong, and you weren't thinking in the moment. You were thinking in your anger. You weren't you weren't rational. You didn't rationalize this. You didn't think it all the way through. Now these words weren't meant to chastise me. These words were meant to to put me to pause and really literally think about what I was doing or what I had done. He told me that, hey, look, this he said that I need you to really just kind of think about what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next. What you did was egregious, so I need you to think about that. And I did put thought to it. And I knew that what I did was wrong, and I knew what I did was very egregious. I just didn't know the level. I just didn't know the level of egregiousness it was. That night I spent the night in the Longpole County Jail until I got transported to the Santa Barbara County Jail. Is and I spent 4 days. I spent 4 days in the Santa Barbara County Jail. When my initial court appearance, I was charged with domestic battery, um, assault, and assault with a deadly weapon. By the grace of God, by the grace of God, and the guardian angels that I had looking out for me. Now, I'm not saying what I'm about to say to glorify an abuser doing things like that, doing things of this nature, but and you'll see why I say by the grace of God in a little later. By God's grace, it was bust down to spousal battery, which is a much lesser charge in the state of California. They gave me credit for the 4 days I served, the 4 days time served. Um, I was on 3 years probation, and I had to see I had to talk had to get anger man I had to get anger man I had to seek anger management counseling. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Wrong. Right, very wrong. In addition to the probation, the anger management courses, there was a protective order or stay away order in place. I wasn't to come within 100 feet of her. Nowhere within 100 feet of her. If we were walking on the same if we were walking on the same sidewalk, I would have to literally cross the street. If we were in the same place or the same venue, I would have to leave. I would have to leave. We couldn't be within 100 feet of proximity of each other. If she came into the place that I worked, I had me personally. I just said I'll just walk out for a moment. Thank God I still had. Thank God my employer still allow me to keep my job. So I thank God for that too. And then on top of the probation and the stay away order and the anger management, I had to pay restitution. Something that I paid off. Something I did made an attempt to pay off right away. But you think after getting all that, that was going to be easy, or you think it would be easy? No, not easy. You think getting a stay away order would be a deterrent? Well, wrong. Because I still had things in her home that I wanted to collect. I wasn't gonna be denied those things. But when she didn't give me those things, I destroyed her property. So in this whole thing, there are two mistakes there are several mistakes that I made, but the first mistake that I made was number one, putting my hands on this woman. Number one. Number two, violating the stay away order. Number three, destroying her property. One of those things that I just mentioned. One of those things I mentioned got me right back in the Santa Barbara County Jail. Which one do you want to guess about? If you don't know, I'll tell you. Violating the stay away order. Now at the time, the detective called me. We talked about that stuff. I didn't think anything of it because it wasn't anything else talked about. I thought I was in the clear. I thought I was free and in the clear. At this time, I was working for a body shop. I had one of their loaner cars and doing some gopher runs. Got pulled over by the police because they didn't. Ouch! They didn't see that type. They didn't see a vehicle with those types of plates before. Though they knew the person that owned the body shop, and they knew that the guy had these loaner and dealer plates. That I got pulled over, and they found out I had a warrant. I got immediately arrested. Went back to the court. They immediately violated my probation, and I had to serve that time. So instead of being a free man and working on things and trying to get things done and everything like that, now I am back in the Santa Barbara County Jail, and I am back in the Santa Barbara County Jail for 4.5 months. And it's it was 5 months because in addition to violating my probation, they also added the destruction of property. They also added a destruction of property charge. So now my probation's violated, and now I'm back in jail for five um 5 months. Being in jail is a long time to reflect on things. Reflect on my actions. Reflect on the consequences of my actions. Thinking about the price that I paid for that. The price that I paid that I paid for that. And in some instances, in 2025 still pay. And I'll get to that a bit later as well. So 5 months go by. Slower than I thought it would go. Slower than I thought it would go by, but it went by. My brother said it was keen enough to get me to get those things, and at that point I'd already kind of moved forward. I had kind of moved forward in a relationship with another person. However, that went to shit too, because this person was seeing somebody else and everything of that nature. So I had to grab all my things, and I moved in with my brother and his then girlfriend at the time. They took me in. They got me they got me clean. They got me cleaned up. They looked out for me, made sure that I had money in my pocket, but also they made sure that I was taken care of and straight at the time. At the time, there was a person that I was interested in, and we had talked a while back when I was working at the music store. And we were friends. So I went to revisit that person just to see if there was anything that could be cultivated from that. And lo and behold, it was. And as we kept talking, our relationship blossomed, and things were going well, or so I thought. I started attending church, things of that nature, and things I became a regular attendee of the church she went to, and tried to involve myself into the ins and outs of that the ministry, things that people do when they involve themselves in ministry. Things were going well. She knew that I did some egregious shit. She knew that I was on probation, and I was still seeking anger management courses, still taking my anger management courses, to which I was almost done with. And they were going to move there. They were moving to Washington State. Me being in this relationship with her, and also feeling like I care for her and things of that nature, I want to go too. There was nothing else left for me in Lompoc, California, except my brother and his girlfriend. There was nothing else left for me there. I had, and this was my thought process. I'd already screwed up. I'd already screwed up in one area of my life by not heeding to the words and the teachings of my father and my uncles. So I felt that I'd screwed up in that instance by not doing that. So I figured maybe Washington State would be a fresh start. I was sad. I was sadly mistaken. Sadly mistaken. 1997. Because I mentioned earlier that the story starts in 1997. It actually starts in 1996. So what I just mentioned to you happened during the year 1996. All me getting arrested for the domestic thing was the latter half of 1996. Me violating my probation was in the latter half of 1996. Me serving those 5 months was in the latter half of 1996, going into 1997. So I'll say the last 2 months of 1996, going going into the 3 months into 1997. So I'll say, so for the purposes of what I'm saying, I'll say March 1997. I wanted to move with this person, and because I wanted a fresh start. I figured that I deserved it after what I had after what I had put myself through. I talked to my probation officer. I said, "Hey, I want to move. I want to move up to Washington State with this young lady. Um, it's going to be a fresh start. I'll make sure that I coordinate my anger management courses with folks up there, and if I need to coordinate my probation with somebody up there, that we can do that too." Probation officer was cool with it. Not a problem. Just make sure you keep in regular contact with me until you can coordinate something up there. Up there. Let me know where you are. Let me know the county that you're living in, and we can coordinate something. So, watching 1997. We moved up to Washington State. Lived in Renton for a moment. End up going to Federal Way. A lot of things happened during that time. Not gonna get into the. Not gonna get into the. Well, I can get into some. I can get into most of it. I'm thinking everything is okay. I'm working 2 jobs. You know, I'm doing great for myself. I completed my anger management courses, and and I was feeling good. I felt that I accomplished something, and I was working 2 jobs, bringing home a steady income. It was until it that I was feeling good for myself until I made a mistake of showing well a paycheck to the person I was dating. She mentioned why I was so short. Well, because I got a kid now and I owe child support. What happened next took me by surprise and took me aback a lot, a bit. I received an open hand hit. I got hit with an open hand. Hard enough for me to taste blood in my mouth. And then then came the berating. At the time I didn't think anything. I didn't think anything. I didn't think anything of it. I thought that maybe she was mad because she felt part of the income was going away. Again, I didn't think anything of it. For I only lived up in Federal Way Washington for the better part of a year. So I will say so the better part of a year for me is probably somewhere between 10 to 11 months. So I didn't live up there a whole year. But from the time And again, I don't know the month. I don't know the month it happened. I don't know the day or anything like that. I remembered. I know the year. That everything else, but that's more or less irrelevant at this. More everything else for me was more or less irrelevant at that point. But it's it was nuts. For the better part of a year, that cycle continued. Visit the so for those who don't know what everybody, I'm pretty sure everyone who's watching and listening knows what domestic violence knows what domestic violence is. But but there are other things that you can that are described with it. You have physical violence. You have emotional. You have emotional abuse. You have the um, psychological aggression. You also have the you also have the sexual abuse. So domestic violence entails a lot of things. For the better part of a year in 1997, I endured physical abuse. I endured emotional abuse. I endured um, psychological aggression, and at times some sexual abuse or sex on demand. And if it wasn't if it wasn't up to snuff, then here comes the physical violence. For 6 months, for the better part of a year, I I I wore those wounds outside and I wore those wounds inside. What I didn't co- what I could you know, what I couldn't I tried to cover it up emotionally with thinking that this is just temporary and that's it's a just a phase and she'll come out of it and things of that nature. But one thing I will say, physical wounds heal. Emotional ones, mental ones, psychological ones, they take a little bit more time. And again, for the time within the year of 1997, that is what I endured. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological aggression, um, sexual aggression, um, coupled sexual aggression coupled with physical violence. I asked myself, what did I do to deserve that? For a long time, I thought it was my penance for harming someone else. I literally thought it was my penance for harming someone else. I figured that this was the price I had to pay for harming someone else. So it was only right that I endure that. Come to find out later on, it wasn't. Come to find out later on, it wasn't a penance. Stuff, things. It wasn't a penance. It was just the nature of that person. Still in this thing, and I'm trying to get out. Now at this point, I need to find a way to get. I need to find a way to get out of here. I need to find a way to leave. Because if I don't leave, something's Something's gonna happen to me where something's gonna happen to me worse physically, or even worse. This person could be so angry with me, they can enact their physical violence on me, and take me out of this, or take me out of here. I didn't want that. I didn't want that at all. I had children. I had children at the time, and figured that my life at that time was worth living. At the time, me enduring the physical violence, I thought that it wasn't. And I thought, again, this was a penance that I had to pay for doing that with a person, doing that to a person. But in this situation, I felt I needed to leave. I felt that I needed to leave, because if not, something was going to happen. Something was going to happen to me, and it would have been to the point to where my mother or my father would have never gotten a phone call stating that something happened to their child, that something happened to their son. So one night, that night we had gotten to another argument, and it ended in physical violence. I got slapped a couple of times, got berated a couple of times, and her her stepfather and the kid the kids left. They left out the house. It wasn't just me and her mother. At the time, I was working two jobs, and the second job was literally a walk, literally a 5 minute walk from the apartment complex that we lived in. So normally, and it was a Subway. So normally, I would just, if I asked the young lady's mom, did she want something from Subway, and I would, make sure I get it for her. And that was a norm. That was a norm for me, and I didn't mind doing that. But this time, this time, I wanted to leave. I needed to leave. With them being gone, they were going to be gone for an extended period of time, not days, but maybe for to the better part 30 minutes to possibly an hour and a half. I figured that this was my time. This was my time to try to get out of here. So I grabbed everything that I came into the relationship with. Everything that she bought me, I left in the closet. Everything that she bought me, I left in the closet. So literally, what I had was a backpack a backpack and another big bag full of things, which was something I could carry, I could hump or carry. So I put all those things in my book bag, in the backpack, and in the rucksack. I think it was a rucksack that I had. Cut I In the room that we occupied, I cut a hole in. I cut away the screen. And I threw the rucksack outside. But most of the time they know me. When I see me, they see me walk out with a backpack, and that's fine. Told the young lady's mother, bye. See you later on tonight. See you later on tonight. Now I had keys to the apartment. I left those keys on the dresser in the room that the young lady occupied. Didn't leave a note. Didn't leave anything. Walked out the door. Walked around the apartment to grab my rucksack. Put that in my hand, and I walked out into the cold, rainy Washington night. The whole time I'm walking, I'm I am terrified. I am terrified that she'll see me, she'll pull over, and the cycle will start again. The whole time I'm terrified. I'm in an unfamiliar location. I have no idea where I'm going, and I just only thing I knew was to leave. That's all I do. Only thing I knew was to leave. And then it was at that moment. It was at that moment that I just stopped in my tracks. Again, This is a cold, rainy night, and certain parts of Washington State it rains a lot. At this point, it wasn't raining that night. It was drizzling, but it was enough to make the streets and the sidewalks wet. So in that moment, I just stopped. I took a breath. I closed my eyes, and I asked God to guide me to where you need me to be, where you want me to be. I opened my eyes. There was a crosswalk. I crossed the crosswalk to get on the other side, of the street, and I walked. The whole time still terrified. Whole time still terrified, but fixated on where God was trying to lead me. And he led me to a bus depot, a public transit bus depot, where a bus was standing right there, was sitting there. The the bus operator, I got on the bus. He told me what the fare was. I didn't have now I just cashed my check from my job, so I had about maybe from Subway, so I had maybe about 350 in my pocket, or in my jacket pocket, or in my wallet. I don't know where it was. I didn't have any change. And the look on my face, the look on my face that he saw the look on my face. He said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Come on aboard." He said, "You lucky. You lucky. I was about to leave." And I told him, "Thank you for not leaving." He said, "Where are you going?" And I told him I would like to go to the nearest Greyhound station, the nearest Greyhound bus station. I said, "Well, that's then you in luck. I'm actually the bus depot to where I got to bring this bus back is at a Greyhound station. So you know just come sit back and just cool and chill out and relax, and you know I I'll let you know when we're here." 45 to 50 minutes later, we were there. I don't know, I forgot where the bus depot, the Greyhound bus station was, but we were there. You know, he led me off the bus. He told me good luck and Godspeed, and I walked into the bus station again, terrified out of my mind, because I didn't know because I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what was going to happen. Had she been there at the bus depot waiting on me, or had she arrived at the bus depot before I boarded that bus. So got to the bus depot, paid for a ticket to go back to San Diego, California. Waited about an hour for the bus to get there. For the bus to be clean, and so everybody could board. Still terrified because I didn't think I was going. It was this many of this was going to transpire or going to happen, and I was terrified. I said, I'm not gonna feel comfortable until I'm out of Washington State. I'm not gonna feel like I'm safe until I'm out of Washington State. And even when I get out of Washington State in California, I knew she knew people around the state, but I knew it was mostly in Lompoc and Santa Barbara and some places in Santa Maria. I didn't think San Diego or Los Angeles or anywhere else or any place else. But even in that instance, I wasn't going to feel safe until I was out of the state, till I was out of Washington State. Day and a half later, I'm in San Diego. I'd already called a friend of mine and let them know that I was coming. They 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 welcomed me in with open arms and just kind of just, I won't say kind of, they accepted me and just loved on me and things of that nature, and that is when I felt a wave of emotion that I probably hadn't felt in a while. I felt safe. The person that I went to go back to California to, was, she wasn't a girlfriend or anything of that. She was just a very good friend who knew, she was just something that she was of someone that a very good friend, and she considered be a friend, and I consider her a friend. She was somebody that was willing to help a friend in distress, a friend in need. And she opened up her home to me. She had discussed it with her significant other, and they okayed it. They were okay with it. We all sat down and said, "Hey, look, hey, you're here, but we want you to, we want you to get yourself, we want you to heal, but we also want you to try to, you know, since you're here, we want you to contribute to the home." And I said, "That's not a problem. I got you. That won't be an issue at all." Now, I say all of that to say this part of it. For years, for years, I have carried that burden. I've carried that weight. I've carried that pain. I've carried those scars, physical, physical, mental, and emotional. And both instances changed my outlook on how I and changed my outlook at the time on how I viewed women. My thing at that time, look, if and if, and that at that time I wasn't gonna talk to you unless it was something that was sexual. I was so afraid. I was so afraid of engaging with someone on that level. I was afraid. I was afraid of me lashing out, but I was also afraid of that person lashing out. So I put up so many walls, I put up so many walls and so many barriers that the only line to look, this is where I'm at. You can't cross this line. And I was so afraid to engage with the opposite sex. I was so afraid to not to be to interact with the opposite sex, to interact with women. Unless it was sexual, I wasn't going to interact with it. Wasn't going to interact with a woman. That's just what that was. Um, had so many walls and so many barriers up that it was crazy. Um, and it put this really negative connotation, this really negative thought process about women in my head at the time. And to be honest with you, I had never really told anybody about those two experiences. Never really mentioned it to anyone. Didn't say anything to anybody. Didn't didn't speak about it in any type of conversation, whether casual conversation or whether casual or any other type of conversation. Didn't mention it to anyone in romantic conversations. I didn't mention that to anybody in those types of conversations because I thought if I were to have mentioned that to someone, about what I did to someone, and then about what was done to me, I would be looked at differently. And again, I carried that into my later adult years. I carried that pain. I looked at myself differently. For a time, I looked at myself and thought that I was less than a man for doing that, for doing that to someone, and then allowing someone to do it to to do it to me. I literally looked at myself as less than a man. I didn't think I was man enough. I didn't think I was strong enough to even be with a woman, be with a woman because I allowed that to happen to me. I thought I was weak. I think about it. I think back on it now, and I say, well, man, that's a that's still a thought. That's still in some cases, in some instances, that's still a thought. Have I have I changed since then? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Is it still hard to talk about? Yeah. It's still hard to talk about. It's taking a lot in me right now to hold those emotions that I have about it in, because it was that's such a impactful part of my life. I didn't speak about my story until um I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2021. I had met a young lady by the name of Lori Brinson. We met at a an author event at the library in Hillsborough County, Florida. She talked a little bit about her story. I talked a little bit about my story. She mentioned that I would be a great person to talk about my story to for um her platform. Her platform is victory over violence. So I attended her that the conference that year in February of 2021, and I spoke about my story, both ends of it, both ends of it. Now this conference was mostly women, so I was only male, the only other male panelist, and it was kind of amazing for it was a bit, it caught me off guard because when I spoke about my story, a lot of women were gasp and everything like that, and a lot of people don't think that that happens to us. It does. When I finally told my story, it felt like there was a weight that was lifted off of me. Now, granted, I'm still paying for I'm still paying some penance for my actions. Paying some penance for my actions. But my story is one of probably several out there of men who have been exposed to this, have been subjected to this, have been put through that, and a lot of most men don't even say anything about it. They just They just let it kind of just it happened, and that's all they'll say about. That's all they'll say about it. But as I conclude this particular podcast, as I conclude this, I want to tell you that you're not alone. You're not alone, and you're not alone in being subjected to that, and you're not alone in talking about that. Your experiences matter. A lot of us as men don't talk about those things because it's not manly to talk about that. And even if you do, and if you even if it is talked about, there's a certain amount of stigma behind that. You're ostracized as a man for even speaking it, for even talking about it, or even daring to even mention it. But I want to tell you that you're not alone in that. You're not at all. And it's easy for me to say from the standpoint of it's easy for me to say from the standpoint of someone who has endured and came out of that. That's not so easy to say for someone who's going through it. I will say that help is available. You may if you are a man and you're listening, if you're watching this, or if you're watching this, or you may be listening to this on Spotify a little bit later on this week, a little bit later on next week, help is available. There are local and national coalitions that you can attach yourself to. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or you can go to the hotline.org and chat. You will be anonymous. You will remain anonymous. One of the things that I've talked about, and I mentioned it in my book, Broken Chains, is once you leave that situation, just remain gone. Don't ever go back to a don't ever go back to a violent or a unstable situation. Even if there's kids involved, leave and stay gone. Just do may put that fight that battle through the court system. But also the other thing that I want to mention, and this has helped me on my journey through this whole thing, and healing from it, and healing through it, is to seek help. Seek the help of a licensed clinician, a licensed clinical social worker, a psychologist, psychiatrist, a therapist. That has helped me a lot in acknowledging what has happened, but also working through what has happened. I know that one thing was my fault. Well, I know that one thing is my fault. Both things I have to be accountable and responsible for, because those are the choices that I made. There are consequences to those choices, and I think once the acceptance of that comes into play, I think a lot of other things will be better to cope with. You know, you're as men, we're human too. In most cases, me us being victims of domestic violence, we're treated less than because of the stigma and because of the expectation that you're a man, you're not supposed to allow all this crap to happen. You're bigger than her, you're stronger than her. Why would you allow her to do that? Well, it's partly because of restraint. But I but again, as I conclude this particular podcast, I just want to let you guys know that there's the help is available and that you can that you can get that help. So yeah, that is my story, guys. That is my story. Um, to a great many, this story may not mean anything, but to those that are going through this it would mean a lot. It also means that you as a man can become a survivor. I want to take this time to number one thank everybody who tuned in tonight. I'm very much appreciative of that. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of bravery to come in front of a camera, to be in front of a camera, and also in front of a microphone to talk about a story that's that's been life changing to me. But I want to say that if it wasn't for if it wasn't for God, I would not be here to tell this story. So all praise is due to the Most High God for that. But before I leave, gentlemen, I want to say a prayer for my brothers that are going through this right now. Father God, in the name of Jesus, I first and foremost, Father God, I thank you for allowing me to be a voice, to allow me to share my story with other people, with other men, so that they can see that healing is possible through this, that restoration is possible through this. And Father God, I thank you for just allowing me to remove me and add you, so that my story can glorify and edify, or can glorify you and edify others. Father God, as I'm speaking right now, there are men in the exact same situation that are in situations that I described. These men are these men are hurting, these men are desperate, these men are looking for a way to come out of this situation. Father God, be there in the midst of them. Guide them, talk to them, protect them, Father. Keep them. Guide them to the way of safety. Guide them in the way of wisdom. Father God, guide those men that I'm speaking of right now, who are in deep mire and deep waters. Guide them to shore, Father. Guide them to the shore of safety. Guide them to the shore of peace. Guide them to the shore of restoration and healing, Father. Father, heal their hearts, heal their hearts, heal their minds, heal their souls, heal their bodies. Point them in the right direction of resources that they can use and that they can utilize to to make this journey less daunting. Father God, be with them in the midst of all of this. Carry them when they can't walk anymore. And as always, I am so careful to give you all the honor, all the glory, and every bit of the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in tonight. I most definitely appreciate you guys. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to talk about this stuff, and as you can see, there's tears in my eyes because I wouldn't be here if God didn't intervene for me. I really wouldn't be here. I'm I'm grateful for the opportunity and the chance, and I want men that are under this that hear this to have that chance. Life is a precious thing, and we all it's something that should be respected. So, but I thank you guys so much for being here. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to speak on something like this because it's not something that I want to talk about, but it's something that I felt I needed to talk about. So I thank you guys for that. So with that being said, I'm gonna bid you guys a good night, and you guys have a wonderful weekend. As I always say on these podcasts, as I always say as I end these podcasts, number one, love on each other. Number two, be good to each other. Number three, we all know it's a crazy ass world out here. So do me a favor. So do me one big favor, y'all. Please be careful out. Y'all, please, 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 please. Y'all be safe out here. I love y'all. I love y'all to life. I love y'all to live. And there's nothing you can do about that. So you guys continue to have a great evening, but also have a great weekend. See y'all in the next one.